When a person dies, their path on earth ends, but the path of the soul continues. We ask ourselves many questions. Where is the one we loved now? What do they feel? Can they hear us? And one of the most delicate yet important questions is being asked more and more often in the modern world. What happens to the soul if the body is cremated? Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, as he was called, left behind numerous readings about life after death, and among them are answers to this seemingly physical but essentially spiritual question. To cremate or to bury, is it important for the soul? Does fire interfere with its transition? Cayce was not a moralist. He did not judge. He spoke as someone who heard and felt what most of us cannot access. His answers did not always align with religious dogmas, but they had their own logic, the logic of the subtle world. He stated, "The soul is not attached to the body. At the moment of death it is already separated. The ritual is only a help for the living, not for the dead. Yet the farewell ritual, the attitude toward the body, create a field, energy, an atmosphere in which the soul takes its first steps into the new world." And here begins the most interesting part. Cayce said, if cremation is carried out with love, with prayer, with acceptance, it does no harm. On the contrary, it can even ease the soul's journey. Because fire is purification, not destruction but transformation, and if the thought accompanying this process is full of light, the soul feels it. But if cremation is an act of fear, denial, escape from death, it leaves a trace. Not on the soul itself, but in the space around it, in the vibration with which it leaves this world. And that can delay, complicate, make the transition more difficult. Cayce's words are important, not because they offer a strict instruction, but because they teach. The main thing, man, is not the form, but the essence, not fire and not earth, but feelings, thoughts, energy. The soul does not care what kind of coffin holds its body, but it feels whether it is being farewelled with respect or with indifference. And here begins what few people talk about, because the question is not about the ashes and not even about the remains. The question is about the state of the living. Cayce emphasized, at the moment of death, an energy field forms around the soul, a kind of subtle cocoon. This field absorbs the emotions of those nearby. It, like a sponge, becomes saturated either with love or fear or emptiness, and it is with this field that the soul moves on. Imagine two people pass away, one surrounded by loved ones, prayers, gratitude, the other in the cold of the crematorium, in haste, without words, without a glance. On the outside, everything seems the same, but inside, in the energy, there's a chasm. One departs into the light, the other with a feeling of being abandoned, and not because fire is evil, but because a person is not just a body. He is memory. He is relationship. Cayce said that the soul can remain near the body for up to 3 days after death, not because it doesn't know it has died, but because it is completing the transition process. It is, as it were, detaching from the earthly layer, and it is precisely at this time that our actions are important, our thoughts, our farewell. If the body is cremated just a few hours after death, with no opportunity to say goodbye, no pause, no prayer, this can throw the soul off rhythm. It may become confused, especially if the death was sudden. The soul may not understand. What happened? Why so fast? Where are my loved ones? Where is the farewell? But even if cremation takes place, say, on the 3rd day, with love, with words, with presence, it can become an act of light, like a candle that burns out, but in its final flame lights the way. Here's the essence. It's not the body that decides, it's the attitude. Fire is not to blame. The coldness of hearts is. Cayce did not oppose cremation. He said, "Anything done with respect, with love, with a pure heart, does not destroy. But if we turn death into a procedure, forgetting that it is a moment of transition, then we lose the most important thing. Not for the soul, for ourselves." Cayce often repeated, "The soul does not die. It leaves, but it still feels." And it is especially in the first days after death that it feels most acutely, like an exposed nerve. Everything we say, think, even feel, is transmitted. The soul picks it up as a signal, and depending on that signal, its path either becomes clear or clouded. Imagine if you're in confusion, in an unfamiliar place and around you, silence, rush, cold. Or the opposite, someone tells you everything is all right, someone whispers a prayer, someone holds a photo, someone cries, but sincerely, with love. That is the real connection between the worlds. And here is an important point. In traditional cultures, people didn't rush the farewell. The body was kept at home. People talked to it, sang, cried, prayed. It wasn't just a ritual, it was a process of release, and the soul felt it. It understood, it is loved, it is remembered, it is not feared. Cremation is fast, sometimes too fast. And if it is done for convenience, if the relatives say, "Do everything as quickly as possible," that's not a crime, no. But it is a mistake of understanding, because in the first days after death, the soul needs the most important thing, our attention, our light, not procedures, warmth. There have been cases when people, even years later, felt guilt. We didn't say goodbye, we rushed, we didn't even look at the body, and that pain remained, not just in them, in the soul, too. Cayce said, "Pain doesn't die if it's not healed. It keeps living, only in another dimension. But if even during cremation a person treated this transition with love, then the fire becomes purification. Then the soul feels it was not abandoned, that it was accompanied, and then it moves on, freely. That is why Edgar Cayce advised, if cremation, do it no sooner than 3 days later. During that time, let the soul understand, you are near, you are saying goodbye. You have not forgotten, and if you can't be there physically, be there in spirit. Light a candle, speak, give thanks. It is not a formality, it is the key." Cayce asserted that the consciousness of the soul does not end abruptly. It departs in layers. First, the physical, then the emotional, then the mental, and only then, spiritual release. This process takes time, and if during this period there is a sudden intervention, for example, immediate cremation, the soul may become confused. He compared it to waking a person suddenly from sleep and sending them straight to a train station, without luggage, without a ticket, without understanding where to go. Yes, they go, but with anxiety, with uncertainty, with the feeling that something remains unfinished. This is especially important in the case of sudden death, an accident, a heart attack, a violent death. The soul in such moments experiences shock, and any external rush only deepens internal confusion. Cayce said, "On such days, what matters is not haste, but silence and closeness, and the simple word, 'I am here.' The question is not whether cremation is allowed, but how it is done, and with what emotions, and what came before it. The soul is like a delicate instrument. It senses falsehood. It senses truth. If a person feared fire all their life, rejected the practice, their soul may become frightened. But if they were calm, if they made the decision in advance, if they spoke about it with loved ones, then everything is different. Then it is a journey, not a blow." Some practices that Cayce respected used a special farewell prayer before cremation. They didn't ask for anything. They gave thanks. They told the soul, "You are free. You have walked your path. We release you with love." This is not mysticism. It is intention. It is that small bridge that gives the soul the feeling, "I was not forgotten. I was given permission." And on the other hand, when a body is simply taken to the morgue, without words, without ritual, without a glance, the soul may become stuck, not leave. And this later manifests dreams, anxiety, poor well-being among loved ones. Cayce said, "If the soul hasn't left, it seeks, it calls. And if you hear the call, answer." There were cases that Cayce spoke of almost with reverence, people who, after a cremation, suddenly felt the room become lighter, as if someone had exhaled, as if the tension had lifted. They didn't hear voices. They didn't see dreams. There was simply a feeling that everything had fallen into place. He said, "When a farewell is done with respect, with acceptance, even ashes can become a symbol of light. But if there is fear, haste, cynicism, then even fire cannot purify." Cremating a body is not a mistake. The mistake is to forget the soul. Cayce emphasized that spirit is beyond form. It does not depend on the body, but form can become a conduit, or a barrier. And how we treat the body after death is not primarily about the body. It's about us, about what we feel, about whether we are ready to let go. One man, according to Cayce, could not come to terms with his mother's death for a long time. He insisted on cremation, but then never picked up the urn. He simply left it at the crematorium. He said, "I don't know what to do with it." And after a month, he began to have dreams. His mother stood at the window, silently watching. Always silently, until finally he went, took the ashes, and buried them under a tree in their favorite park, where they used to walk. And then the dreams stopped. For the first time, there was silence. This is what matters, not the ritual itself, but closure, understanding, and inner dialogue. The soul does not need flowers. The soul needs to be acknowledged, not brushed off, not ignored, to be told, even in thought, "You were, you are moving on." Cayce always said, "The greatest evil is indifference." And in matters of death, this is especially sharp, because if the body simply goes into the furnace while relatives argue over who inherits the apartment, it's not just painful, it's destructive. Not for the soul, for us, because then we lose the last opportunity to say, "Thank you, forgive me, I remember." Cayce asserted, "The soul knows everything, not through the mind, not through logic, but through vibrations. It feels what is happening to it, how it is spoken of, with what heart it is being sent off. And even if the body is burned, if no trace remains, the soul still returns. Not to the body, but to the moment, to the feelings, to those who remained." He said, "Death is not disappearance. It is a point of contact. And at that point, everything matters. Not so much the fire as the fire in the heart. Not so much the urn as the memory. Not so much the form as the feeling with which we say, 'Rest in peace.'" Some letters received by Cayce after readings were filled with remorse. "We didn't know what to do. We did what was easiest, quickly, without words, and now it hurts us." And in response he wrote, "It is never too late. Speak to the soul. Wherever it is, it will hear." This was the great secret Cayce passed on for decades. Nothing is lost. Everything that comes from love reaches its recipient. And if you didn't say it then, say it now. with a simple phrase, at sunset, in silence, by a photo, because even after cremation the most important thing remains, the connection. He called it the thread of light. It's invisible, but it exists, and it continues as long as we remember, as long as we feel, as long as there is gratitude within us, because the soul, in his words, asks for nothing but one thing, to be understood, and if we can give that, we perform a sacred act. Cayce told the story of a woman who lost her husband and eventually decided to scatter his ashes over the sea. She couldn't take that step for a long time. She was afraid it would push him away forever, but on the day she did it, alone at dawn, she felt for the first time joy, not from the loss, but from the light, as if he was near, as if he said, "You did the right thing. I am free, and you are too." That's what matters. Cremation does not mean betrayal. Sometimes it is liberation, but it must be conscious, with love, with respect, because the soul is not a prisoner of ash, but it feels with what intention the farewell was made, and if it was sincere, it smiles and moves on. Cayce often repeated, "The soul does not need the body, but it values respect." This does not mean that one must adhere to ancient rites or follow strictly prescribed rituals. It means to put truth into the farewell. Because lies, formality, coldness, these are what hurt not the body, but the soul itself. One of the most powerful examples Cayce gave concerned a man who died far from home. His family couldn't bring his body back, and he was cremated in a foreign country. The son was tormented. "I didn't even get to say goodbye." And during a Cayce session it was said, "He is not there. He is near. You said goodbye when you thought of him with warmth. And he felt it. It all happened. Don't be afraid." This moment is key. Farewell is not in the coffin, not in the ashes. It's in the heart. If you lived through the moment of transition with sincere feeling, then you were there, even if thousands of kilometers away. The soul is not bound by distance. It hears the call. It feels the tears, and it comes. But there is another side. Cayce warned, if cremation becomes a way to avoid pain, if someone says, "Let's do it quickly so we don't have to think about it," then emptiness arises. The soul feels rejection, not anger, no, but longing, because even in its final moment, it wasn't given the most important thing: acknowledgement, contact, gratitude. That is why Cayce insisted, speak, even if it's late. Speak to the soul. A letter, a prayer, a thought. This is not superstition. This is vibration. And the soul lives in the world of vibrations. And if you emit light, it reaches, always. Some feel guilt after cremation. What if we did the wrong thing? But Cayce said, there is no wrong when there is love. Mistakes begin when actions are dictated by fear, not the heart. If the farewell was filled with care, the soul accepts it and will send a sign itself. Such a sign, he said, may come suddenly. A song, a word, a line. A breeze that blows at the very moment you remember, or a dream. The soul may appear, not to blame, but to say, you are not guilty, everything is right, I am moving on. Because the most important thing is not what happened to the body, but what happened to us, to our feelings, to our choice, to remember, to be grateful, to live, because everyone we see off becomes a part of us. And how we live our after determines what becomes of their after. Sometimes Cayce was asked directly, so after all, is it better to bury or to cremate? He always responded evasively, but the essence of his words was clear. What matters is not what, but how. The body is just a temporary dwelling, a house that the soul has left. How you close it, with pain or with gratitude, is what truly matters. He said that earth is a symbol of continuation, fire, a symbol of purification, and each has their own path. If you chose cremation, let the body return to light. If a burial, let it be a return to fertility, but always with love, without fear, without haste. Cayce warned, there is a danger when the body is cremated for convenience, without inner understanding, without farewell. In this case, a lingering may occur. The soul seems to wait. It doesn't cling, but it feels the incompleteness, and then disturbances happen, in dreams, in thoughts, in the inner sense of peace. He advised, even if much time has passed, you can still complete the farewell. Go to where you feel the soul. Remember, say aloud, thank you, forgive me, I let you go. And that will be heard. There, always. One of Cayce's sessions described a woman who suffered for years after cremating her mother. She was tormented by the question, did I harm her soul? Cayce said, your pain is not from the cremation. It's from the fact that you haven't forgiven yourself. Your mother is waiting for you to let go. She doesn't need the ashes. She needs your peace. The power of these words lies in their simplicity. The soul doesn't need a body, it needs light. And that light is you. Your choice, your memory, your forgiveness. These are the fire that guides the soul to the next level. Not the flame of the furnace, but the flame of the heart. Cayce repeated, love is the only thing that doesn't burn. Don't fear cremation, fear indifference, the lack of words, the lack of feeling, the lack of light, because it is precisely the absence of light that prevents the soul from moving on, and love leads. And finally, Cayce insisted, in any form of farewell, the ritual is not what matters. Presence is. The soul feels when you are near. And if you are near, even in thought, even later, that is enough. So if you lost someone and chose the path of cremation, don't blame yourself. Look inside, light a candle, and remember how he or she smiled. That is the bridge. That is the contact. That is the light. Death is not the end. It is merely a return home, and how you say goodbye determines what light the soul enters that home with. If this story touched you, support its light. Click like so it reaches those who are seeking answers now. Share in the comments. How do you feel about the topic of cremation? Did you feel something special at the moment of farewell? We read every word you write, and we gently hold these revelations. And if you want to know more about the soul's life after death, subscribe to the channel. There's still so much ahead that people don't say out loud, but that's worth hearing.